Hello, welcome to this video. I'm back with another plot of another story, and this time around I have picked The Oval Portrait, written by Edgar Allan Poe, a very popular writer who has contributed a lot in gothic genre. Even in this story we find some horror effect, so in a way we can say this short story has a horror effect, and it talks about life and art. Especially it shows about the relationship between life and art. We find a narrator and there are other characters as well, and we see two stories going hand in hand in one story. So first we find the story of this narrator who is injured, wounded, and they forcefully entered in a castle. And in the book it has said that they have forcefully entered a city. So yes, it's about the narrator who is wounded and his valet who is with him. And likewise, simultaneously, we see how the story gets unfolded by the narrator about this woman who dies at the end because of her husband's obsession toward painting. So the oval painting is of that woman who dies at the end in the process of her husband who is preparing the best painting, who eventually falls in love with the painting, and at the end he finds his wife is dead right beside him. So it's a very interesting story. At the same time we find how the writer is trying to connect life with the art. So, do we really feel like there is life in art? So, that's the major question this text raises in here. So, let's start off. I start with the plot line of the story, and then I will definitely give out few of the answers from the book. And of course, I have received a few of the messages saying that I should do something in Nepali as well. And I thought like I would make a separate video for Nepali version. So I hope you will just watch my Nepali version as well after watching the English version's video. So yes, let's start with the plot of The Oval Portrait. Alright, I'm going to read out a summary from Grade 7. I found the summary on this website. And yes, I'm going to tell you what happens in the story. Pedro, the valet, brings the injured narrator to an abandoned city because he does not want the narrator to have to sleep outside. They force an entry and prepare for a night in one of the building's smallest apartments, which lies in a minor tower. The apartment has rich but decaying decorations, including tapestries, trophies, and paintings. The narrator is semi-delirious from his wounds and takes an intense interest in the painting. So he has Pedro close the shutters, light a candelabrum, and open the bed curtains so that the narrator can look at the paintings while reading a book he has found on pillow, which provides information about the paintings. Rather than going to sleep with his valet, the narrator reads and observes until around midnight, when he decides to shift the candelabrum to throw more light on the book. The main effect of the narrator's movement of the candles is that the light now reveals a portrait that had been hidden in the dark near one of the bedposts. The painting is of a girl on a cusp of becoming a woman, and the narrator feels a sudden impulse to close his eyes, which he does in order to calm down and view the painting more clearly. When he opens his eyes again, he sees that his senses had momentarily deceived him and started him to wakefulness. The portrait displays a beautiful painting of a girl's head and shoulder in the style of Thomas Sully, an American portraitist. The details below the bust darken into the shadow of the background, and the oval frame is covered with gold filigree in the Moorish style. The painting is beautiful, as is the subject. But the narrator had momentarily mistaken it for a living person. Although it is obviously a painting, had caused the effect before respectfully returning the candelabrum to its previous position so that he cannot see the painting. The narrator opens his book to read about the oval portrait. The narrator opens the book he had found nearby his bed. It's about the oval portrait, and it describes the subject as a beautifully cheerful woman. She is described as a maiden of rarest beauty who marries the painter for love. The painter, the book relates, is passionate but studious and as much in love with his painting as he is with his wife. Consequently, although the wife is naturally happy and loving of all things, she despises his art and the tools of painting because he has to contemplate with his art for the painter's time and affection. The wife's dislike of her husband's art eventually comes into conflict with his love for the painting when he asks her to sit as a model for a portrait. She dislikes this idea, but being a modest and obedient wife, she agrees to sit in the dark tower where the only light comes from above so that he can paint. The painter is passionate about the painting, but because of his moodiness and dreaminess, he does not notice that she is wasting away in the dark. Nevertheless, she does not complain and continues to smile for his portrait because she knows that her husband is obsessed with his project. The portrait is so lifelike that everyone who sees it marvels and concludes that it is a combination of his skill and his love for his wife. However, as the portrait nears completion, the painter shuts himself and his wife into the tower, away from visitors, so that he can place all his concentration on his works, not realizing that his wife grew paler as the portrait grows more lifelike. When he finishes the painting, he stares at it and stares that when he finishes the painting, he stares at it and realizes that this is indeed life itself. Before turning to his wife and realizing that she died during his last few strokes of the brush. So it has a very sad ending. The wife dies at the end because her husband does not pay attention to her. Yes, he was paying attention to her and painting her on some canvas, but he does not realize that while doing that, her wife was getting paler. She was dying inwardly. Yes, that's about the summary of the oval portrait. So let's head into the important questions from the book. So listen carefully. I'm going to read out the questions and answers from the book. And the first question is, where did the narrator and his servant make forcible entrance? They made a forcible entrance into the abandoned city. So we can also say that abandoned palace. Which special picture did the narrator notice in the room? He noticed the special picture of a girl. She was young and it looked so lively. Next one. Describe the portrait that the narrator saw in the room. The portrait that the narrator saw in the room was in an oval-shaped frame. It revealed the head and shoulders of the young woman. The arms, the bosom, and even the ends of the radiant hair dissolved untraceable into the unclear yet deep shadow which formed the background of the whole. And another question is, what is the relationship between the portrait painter and its subject? The relationship between the painter and its subject is they are married to each other, they are husband and wife. Now, next question, what is the theme of the story? Who is the woman depicted in the oval portrait? The story Oval Portrait deals with the theme of the relationship between art and life. Art and obsession with it are showed as killers and responsible for the young bride's death. In the context, art is equivalent to death. The association between art and life is considered as a rival phenomena. In the story, it is suggested that art can reveal the artist's guilt or evil and may even destroy someone's life. The woman depicted in the oval portrait is the wife of the painter and the victim of painter's passion for the portrait. So next question. The oval portrait is a short horror story by Edgar Allan Poe involving the disturbing circumstances surrounding a portrait in a situ elaborate. Yes, the story is written by popular Gothic writer Edgar Allan Poe. So we find some horror elements in it. In the story, we see the abandoned city, that means abandoned mansion, where there's dark setting. At the same time, we see a woman dies, and we see a live woman in the painting. So these are the things we see in Gothic or horror stories. All these elements we find in the story. At some point, we also find the description of Radcliffe's story, someone who has already contributed a lot of Gothic stories. In a way, we see it's a horror story. The mood of the narrator is also very, which has the impact of horror. So, in a way, we can say that the gloomy atmosphere, someone who dies in the mansion, right, and the dark setting, where there is the candle and where there is the oval portrait of a dead woman, these are the elements to say that this story is a short horror story. It is set in gloomy abandoned mansion, although the mansion is deserted. It contains objects of a dark and mysterious past, such as the oval portrait itself. The image of the remote abandoned city is given a hint of mystery and gloom. The interior, where its walls are decorated with tapestry and manifold and multiform armorial trophies and great number of spirited modern painting, is tattered and antique. The dark setting and shadowy circumstances of the prior events provide the expression that the story has a bizarre twist. The dark setting and shadowy circumstances of the prior events provide the impression that the story has a bizarre twist. The reader's anticipation of mystery is sustained by the appearance of a lifelike portrait of a woman in one of the darker nooks of mysterious room. So that is why it is short horror story. The oval portrait suggests that the woman's beauty condemns her to death. Discuss. The reference of the painting state that the young lady in the portrait is very beautiful. She loses her life because her husband compels her to sit for many weeks in an attempt to make the most beautiful portrait of her. Though the lady sits next to her husband, he is so immersed into his painting to create a beautiful portrait of his wife, but he does not realize his wife withdrawing from her body slowly. It reveals the sad reality of the husband's failure to witness the beauty of his wife. As he was an artist, he wants to treasure it in the form of a portrait. In this way, her beauty condemns her to own death. Next question says, discuss the story as a framed narrative, a story within a story. The oval portrait is a framed narrative or a story that contains story within a story. In the first part of the story, we encounter the unnamed narrator who is injured and stranded at night for unknown reasons. He, along with his companion and servant Pedro, takes shelter in an abandoned mansion. The narrator says awake while his servant sleeps. He is captivated by the paintings on the room wall and studies a book containing their history. Noticing a lifelike painting of a young woman, he reads about it in the book. In the second section, the narrator tells how a beautiful woman marries a painter who is completely absorbed in his work. Although she does not love his work, she agrees to sit in front of him for the portrait. In a process, it took so many weeks. As the portrait nears completion, the lady grows increasingly weak. In placing the final touches of his masterpiece on the canvas, he suddenly realizes that she is dead. Another question says, the story is told in a descriptive style with plenty of imagery and symbolism. Which images and symbols do you find in the story? The mansion is abandoned and worn out. The turret room is in a remote section of the mansion. The room is rich in decoration, but they are tattered and antique. The walls are full of tapestries, trophies, and spirited modern paintings. The vivid description of the mansion provides a Gothic image. Likewise, the description of the portrait describe how real and beautiful it is. Although she is dead, she is painted so lifelike in the portrait. The dark gloominess of the abandoned house is a classic background for a Gothic story. The painter is the symbol of fanaticism. The woman in the oval portrait is the victim of the painter's passion for painting. The oval portrait symbolizes the immortality of art. The frame is a symbol of the general objectification she faced as a physically attractive woman. Okay, and the next question is, what does the expression "she was dead" mean? The expression "she was dead" mean the painter's realization of the death of his beloved because of his devotion to the portrait. His wife remains in an obedient pose for many weeks. As the work continues, her health becomes increasingly poor. However, the painter does not notice the worsening condition of his wife, continuing to paint desperately without taking his eyes off the canvas. Given the last brush stroke, the painter is delighted with the liveliness of his creation, but turning his wife, he realized that she is dead. So she is dead means she now does not have his wife. All he has is lifeless art in place of a wife. So at the end, he was happy to create something which is so lively, something that's very beautiful, right? Something that's immortal. On the other hand, he missed out something that's mortal and was not for long with him. So in a way, it shows the relationship between life and art. Yes, art is immortal piece, and life is a mortal piece, but when artist does not value that, when they lack the vision of taking portraits or art as it is, yes, it may look like immortal, but it has no life in it. And one who gives no attention to something that is mortal and remains for some time with the artist, they are going to definitely lose that person, like the painter at the end lost his wife. I hope this video is appropriate for you to make notes on the oval portrait written by Edgar Allan Poe. So if you have any question regarding to this topic or any other topic, don't forget to drop your queries on the comment box. That's all in this video. Thank you and have a happy learning. Bye-bye.